History remembers the mysteries as secret cults and philosophies. Their initiates were trained in the disciplines of the visible world: mathematics, astronomy, music, and medicine, using sacred knowledge as their guide. But beyond these third-dimensional applications, they were also training to navigate other planes of reality. Manly P. Hall taught that the physical world is only one layer of existence. Beyond it are the astral and spiritual realms, real, structured, and inhabited. If the physical world is just one level of reality, I have to ask, who or what is waiting on the other side? For centuries, whispers of hidden wisdom have echoed through ancient texts, secret societies, and sacred symbols, a wisdom said to transcend religion, empire, and even time itself. In the early 20th century, a young man with no formal education and no credentials somehow uncovered it. His name was Manly Palmer Hall, and what he discovered connects forgotten rituals, lost civilizations, occult orders, and the very architecture of the human mind. Whether you believe that the world is shaped by hidden hands or guided by higher truths, what Hall uncovered forces us to reconsider both. Hall's work asks a question that we can't ignore. What if the secrets of the past were never lost, only hidden in plain sight? To Manly P. Hall, the physical world was just one layer of reality. Above it stretched entire regions of existence, each with its own laws, landscapes, and inhabitants. First came the astral plane, a realm that mirrors the physical but responds instantly to thought and emotion. It's where dreams, visions, and out-of-body experiences take place. Above that was the mental plane, the world of pure archetype and idea where the blueprints for reality exist before they take form. And beyond those were even higher spiritual planes, rarely ever glimpsed by human eyes. Hall said that these planes weren't just spiritual metaphors, but they were real territories. And just like physical travel, moving between required skill, preparation, and protection. My first instinct is to picture the astral as an empty chasm, but on the contrary, it's actually very much populated, with entities that range from helpful guides to deceptive imposters. Some were tied to human destiny, others, Hall warned, had no interest in our growth at all. To Hall, developing the ability to project into these realms was part of our natural evolution. It allowed a person to gather knowledge, meet teachers, and witness truths unavailable to ordinary senses. But there was risk. Just as you wouldn't wander into a dangerous neighborhood without preparation, venturing into the astral untrained could leave you lost, drained, or influenced by forces that you don't understand. Hall believed that learning to navigate the astral was just as important as learning to navigate the physical world. Because whether we explore it or not, we're already connected to it. Every dream, every sudden inspiration, every strange feeling of being watched. In his view, these were moments when the boundaries between worlds got thin, and he believed humanity's next great frontier wasn't in outer space. It was in the layers of reality we're already swimming in, but have barely begun to map. Manly P. Hall often compared the astral plane to an ocean, vast, uncharted, and just like the physical seas, it had currents, climates, and hidden dangers. The lower astral, dense, heavy, and close to the physical, This was the most chaotic. Here, thought forms linger like fear, anger, desire. They would all take on visible shape. Many of the hauntings reported in the physical world, Hall said, originate in this layer, impressions and entities that haven't fully moved on yet. The middle astral was brighter, more ordered, a place of dreamlike cities, a landscape that responds to thought and meetings with other travelers. Here, many encounter guides or teachers or even loved ones who've passed on. The higher level was the gateway, the place where the astral currents dissolve into the mental plane. And at this level, form starts to fade, and reality becomes pure idea. Travelers who reach it often return with sudden insight, flashes of inspiration, or visions of future possibilities. Hall stressed that moving between these levels wasn't about floating up in space. It was about tuning consciousness, just like changing the frequency on a radio. The danger, he warned, was that not every region was welcoming, and not every guide was what it appeared to be. In the astral, deception can be perfect. When you're there, appearances can be convincing beyond question. A saint, a friend, even a god, all masks that can conceal a parasite. This is why Hall emphasized discipline, moral clarity, and self-control before attempting astral travel. Your inner state is your passport and your shield. Because in this state, you don't just observe the environment, you create it. And what you carry with you, be it fear or faith, greed or generosity, determines not just where you go, but what finds you when you get there. And if you knew that, if you understood the stakes, you'd want a map. And that's why the ancients taught the doctrine of the spheres. To them, the afterlife wasn't a choice between two destinations. It was a journey through a series of worlds, each one tied to one of the planets above us, and to the layers of reality we can't see with the naked eye. When you hear doctrine of the spheres, it's easy to picture something abstract and mystical, but in the ancient world, this wasn't vague poetry. The spheres were quite literally the planets. The Moon, Mercury, Venus, the Sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, plus the fixed stars and realms beyond. But here's the part most people miss. In the mystery traditions, those planets were only the outer garments of something deeper. Each sphere was a state of consciousness, a vibrational realm, and a home to specific intelligences. The ancients believed that after death, and sometimes even in life through astral projection, the soul literally passed through these zones. The physical planet we see in the sky is just a third-dimensional anchor point. The real sphere was a whole dimension layered into the structure of reality. Take the sphere of Venus. Physically, it's the orbiting planet we can track in the night sky. But astrally, it's the realm of beauty, harmony, and spirit beings tied to love and creative force. The moon, astronomically our closest neighbor, moving the tides and our own biological rhythms. In the mysteries, the moon is the gate of incarnation, ruling memory, emotion, and the dream world. Mercury, the swiftest planet. In myth, Hermes the messenger. In the occult, the sphere of the mind, language, thought, and the quicksilver nature of the traveler's own consciousness. The sun, not a planet, but the source of light and life. In myth, Apollo the radiant. In the occult, the sun is the self, the will, the light within, the balancing point of all other forces. It sits in the fourth sphere, balanced between the inner planets and the outer, holding the currents in harmony. To pass the sun's sphere is to face the question of alignment. Will you radiate truth or cast shadows? Mars, in myth, Aries, war, conflict, courage. In the occult, Mars is the forge, the sphere of action, discipline, and the trials that harden the soul. And Jupiter, the largest planet, radiating more heat than it receives. In myth, Zeus, king of the gods, the lawgiver. In the occult, Jupiter expands whatever it touches. Wisdom if you seek truth, corruption if you don't. Every sphere had this triple meaning, physical, astral, and psychological. The idea that the soul's journey involved passing through each one, shedding the coloring it gave your perception until you reached the outermost gate, Saturn. Oh yes, you thought I forgot about Saturn. As you all know from watching this series, Saturn was the great limiter, the keeper of time, the final wall between the soul and freedom from matter. Saturn is the gate, the outer wall of the classical solar system, the test before the soul can pass into the greater mysteries. Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto weren't known to the ancients. Uranus wasn't discovered until 1781, Neptune in 1846, and Pluto in 1930, so they have no place in the original sphere's cosmology. Hall sticks to this older model because for him, the spheres are as much a state of consciousness as they are physical bodies. Saturn marks the outer boundary of the human soul's normal journey, and beyond it, you leave time and enter the eternal realms. So, if we see this system as a map of consciousness, these outer planets could represent uncharted waters, realms the ancients sensed but could not name. Uranus as the shock of sudden awakening, Neptune as the ocean of the collective mind, and Pluto as the descent into death and rebirth. Beyond Saturn, the path isn't marked. It's an open sea. In the ancient view, if you could pass beyond Saturn's sphere, you stepped outside the prison of time entirely. That's the rabbit hole the ancients were talking about. The planets were cosmic waypoints and navigational charts for consciousness itself. Today, astronomers can measure the literal frequencies of the planets. Deep radio hums, electromagnetic pulses, even sound waves carried through the solar wind. Venus hums an eerie low pitch. Mars sings a thin, high vibration. Jupiter roars like a distant thunder. Hall would say these aren't just curiosities or coincidences. He would say that they're the signatures of the spheres themselves. Subtle forces the ancients claim could shape thought, emotion, and even destiny. Reality works like a kind of orchestra, and the planets are the instruments. Each one plays its own note, and together they create the structure of our experience. We can talk about spiritual planes and alternate dimensions all day, but the ancients weren't content with theory. Charts and diagrams were just the beginning. For the ancients, the real test was whether you could go there. In Egypt, Greece, and even India, initiates trained to leave the body and explore the astral world directly. It took discipline, long fasts, chants, rituals of purification, all designed to tune consciousness like an instrument. Egyptian priests practiced something called temple sleep. They'd spend nights inside sacred chambers, waiting for visitors that would carry them beyond the veil. In Greece, the rites of Eleusis guided seekers into dream states, where they claimed to walk among the gods. In India, yogic traditions mapped similar journeys through meditation and mantra. In every tradition, they employ sensory deprivation. It seems that one of the keys to unlocking the astral door is to sever as much of our five sensory ties as possible. We have to force our minds to release connection to our third-dimensional bodies. These journeys could test the limits of the body and mind. Some initiates emerged transformed, carrying visions of order and beauty. Others never returned the same, For the ancients, this risk was proof of its power. Hall borrowed some of his language from Theosophy, the movement launched by Madame Blavatsky in the late 1800s. But where Theosophy laid out a rigid, almost bureaucratic map of the invisible world, Hall turned it into something conceptual, something that everyone could experience for themselves. And Theosophy itself? That is a story for another week. It was a movement as controversial as it was influential, with secrets, schisms, and scandals all its own. But lucky for us, he outlined what actually happens when the astral body separates. The first sign is a shift in vibration, a subtle hum or a change in sensation as the two bodies begin to part. Then comes what Hall called the silver cord, a luminous thread binding the traveler to the physical form. No matter how far you wander out of body, this cord ensures your return. And within the astral state, thought and emotion take on new intensity. A stray fear can shape the very landscape around you. A single focused thought can move you across great distances in an instant. Later, explorers like Robert Monroe or William Bullman describe the exact same things. The vibrations, the sense of floating free, the tether that pulls you back. Hall was pointing to these mechanics decades earlier, showing how consistent these experiences are across time. And to Hall, every initiate's journey, whether it was in Egypt or Greece or modern times, was a rehearsal for the greatest transition of all, the passage beyond death itself. Think of the astral not as a diagram, but as a world. Unlike the void of space, these planes were alive. Hall described the astral as a vibrational ecosystem, a place woven out of thought, intention, and memory. What you encountered there depended as much on your inner state as on the environment itself. There were thought forms of the living, shapes and scenes projected outward from our minds. There were the shells of the dead, fading remnants that still wander but no longer carry the spark of a soul. And above all, there were higher intelligences, guides, guardians, and teachers who moved with purpose, shaping the currents of human emotion. The astral doesn't just reflect us back to ourselves. It bends and amplifies. A single spark of fear can loom like a giant. A small seed of doubt can reverberate into entire landscapes. What you bring is multiplied until you have no choice but to face it. To Hall, this realm wasn't inherently friendly or hostile. It was simply another order of nature, layered and intricate and alive, a mirror of consciousness itself. Accounts of astral travel often reflect on this dual nature. One traveler might describe radiant halls of music, while another, stepping through the exact same gate, finds only gray corridors and dark whispers. Hall believed that both of these were real, not because the astral changed, but because the traveler did. It was all based on perception. There's actually a perfect passage in Secret Teachings of All Ages where Hall devotes an entire section to what he calls the dweller on the threshold and the dangers of astral wandering. The astral is the receptacle of not only the impressions of human thought, but also the baser impulses of mankind. Here exist the shells of the dead and the thought forms created by passion and ignorance. To the untrained seeker, these illusions might appear as truths, and shadows may be mistaken for beings of light. We've seen the astral as luminous, cities of light, guides, the remnants of the dead. But Hall also warned that not everything you'll meet there is benign. the astral has its shadows, and they are shaped by us. Hall described the astral as a place woven by thought and emotion, which means our nightmares live there too. Fear, rage, and desire all take on form. Temporary, yes, but potent. The untrained mind wandering in these regions could mistake them for gods or fall prey to their pull. Among these are what Hall called the shells of the dead, husks without a soul, that eventually dissolve altogether. After death, the immortal part of the person, the soul or higher self, withdraws from the physical and subtle bodies. What's left behind is a kind of astral imprint, a residue of personality, memories, and habits, but without the divine spark that animated it. These husks, sometimes called shades or shells, can still drift in the astral for a time, animated like a hologram. Some traditions say that they can even mimic the living person, which is why mediums sometimes contact what seems like Uncle Joe, but in esoteric teachings, it's only his discarded shell. Over time, deprived of true vitality, these shells dissolve back into the substance of the astral plane itself, absorbed into what Hall calls the astral light, the psychic atmosphere of humanity. So when he says they dissolve, he means they gradually lose coherence until they're indistinguishable from the larger astral current, like a drop of ink fading into water. And some occult writers suggest that these husks can cling unnaturally long if kept alive by human attention, for example, seances, grief, or obsession. But in their natural course, they thin out and fade away, drifting until they dissolve. To the uninitiated, these husks could appear alive, moving and speaking and even answering as if they were the person they once knew. But Hall was clear they weren't alive. They were only echoes, drifting shadows of a life that had already moved on. Hall warned of vampiric thought forms, not quite devils, and certainly not gods, but parasites of human imagination. Born from fear and desire, they fed on the careless like psychic leeches. Later traditions gave these forces darker names, archons, jinn, even demons. But Hall didn't use those words. He understood the principle, though, that the human mind can generate its own predators. To Hall, this wasn't hell in the religious sense. It was simply nature at work. The astral is a mirror, and if you carry shadows within you, you will find them waiting for you on the other side. Hall never romanticized the astral. He described it as a region of mirrors where the untrained seeker could be dazzled or destroyed. In the Secret Teachings of All Ages, Hall warned of what he called the dweller on the threshold, a presence that tests anyone who ventures across the veil. For some, it appears as a monstrous being, terrifying in form. For others, it may seem like a luminous guide, but Hall insisted these were projections, masks shaped by the seeker's own fears and desires. Step into the astral unprepared, and you won't just meet what's out there. You'll meet yourself, magnified, twisted, and reflected back at you in ways you may not be ready to face. Hall described astral illusions that could tempt or terrify, shells of the dead that mimic life, thought forms born from obsession, greed, or grief, and the most dangerous of all, parasites of consciousness, feeding on the vitality of the unwary. And this is why the ancients guarded these mysteries. The astral wasn't meant to be a playground for the curious. To Hall, it demanded purification, training, and discipline, because whatever you're carrying with you, be it fear, anger, even pride, it will be waiting for you when you get there. Not every encounter Hall described was human in origin. He left the door open for something even stranger: visitors from worlds that touch our own. Hall suggested that some otherworldly beings do not descend from distant planets, but emerge from the invisible layers of reality, the astral, the subtle planes, the worlds between worlds. He wrote of luminous intelligences that guide and dark entities that ensnare. Both, he said, could step into our awareness under the right conditions. And here's the curious part. Compare that with modern reports of UAPs. They appear suddenly, shift form, defy physics, and vanish without a trace. Witnesses describe disorientation, missing time, and even changes in consciousness. The parallels to astral encounters are hard to ignore. Hall himself hinted that intelligences work just beyond the veil of our senses, occasionally breaking through. In modern UAP reports, craft that appear, vanish, shift form, and even alter consciousness, well, they echo those descriptions. It raises questions. Are some UFO encounters not mechanical at all, but maybe they're moments where the astral bleeds into our world? Hall said that being in this state could give the soul lessons it couldn't find elsewhere. To recognize illusion, to focus intention, and to grow through challenge. It was where the soul practiced clarity, learned to steer its own imagination, and prepared for higher work. He described the astral as a training ground, where the seeker learns discipline of mind. To wander there is to face your own reflections, and some are radiant, others are distorted, until you can tell the truth from shadow. But Hall also cautioned that it is not the final destination. The astral is still a realm of form, of impermanence. Beyond it is what endures, when all form falls away. And then begins the real journey. So what is the purpose of learning how to explore the astral? Why must we leave our third-dimensional body behind for moments at a time? For Hall, it was never just about curiosity or exhibition. It was training, a school for the soul. In his lectures, he called the astral a proving ground where we sharpen the lens of perception, confront illusions, and learn how thought itself shapes reality. He wrote, "The astral world is a strange country, where the unreal masquerades as the real, and only the wise discern the difference." To Hall, moving through this realm was like walking through a hall of mysteries, dazzling, sometimes disorienting, but necessary if the soul was to grow stronger. Every vision, every encounter was an exercise of discernment. What is truth? What is shadow? What is simply our own reflection gazing back at us? And he was clear. Even the most radiant experiences were not the end of the road. Beauty, wonder, even whole landscapes of light, these too had to be outgrown, because beyond the astral lies something so much greater, a level of reality untouched by illusion, where the soul meets not reflection, but source. The ancients told this through myth, like the story of Krishna, when his mother looked into his mouth and saw the entire universe contained there. The stars, the heavens, the whole of creation, all within a small child. The astral teaches us the same truth, that the boundaries between out there and in here are thinner than we think. And the worlds we wander are reflections of the worlds that we carry inside. Next time on Hall of Mysteries. In the 19th century, a woman with piercing eyes declared she was in contact with the ancient masters. She named it Theosophy. Manly P. Hall stood at the edge of this movement. He absorbed its wisdom while refusing its dogma. Join us next time for Hall of Mysteries, Episode 6, Theosophy, and the return of the mysteries. This is Hall of Mysteries, and the veil is lifting.